When we all come together, such as a day today, and attend a worship service, it would be my hope that all of us know that we're really entering into a process of intentional spiritual growth and unfoldment and spiritual awakening. That it may be just 1 hour, it's a small piece, but your spiritual growth includes much more than just our time being here. This is very important as it is. This is a time where we plant seeds. This is a time where you set intentions. This is a time where ideas and truths are able to be planted in your consciousness, and then we continue throughout our week and each day to seek to live those principles and those truths. An aspect of spiritual growth and awakening is the process of freeing the mind. Freeing the mind, okay? It is becoming free of the conflicts of the mind, freeing the mind to return back home, okay? Back home centered in the divine, centered in the truth of God, in the good of God. And when you're centered in that truth, your vibration, your frequency, your state of being is totally different. And the mind can take us off in various places into upset and anxiety and fear and what have you. And so it is basically a matter then, spiritual growth, of learning to put the mind under the direction of the one mind, the one presence, the one power, the one intelligence, the all that is, which we call God. And so meditation is a practice having to do with bringing the mind home, back home. Mindfulness is a spiritual practice that has to do with bringing the mind back home. And there's a story about a woman that came to the Buddha and asked him how to meditate. And he told her to remain aware of her every moment, to be mindful, to be present with where she was and what she was doing, to be aware of her hands every moment as she drew water from the well, knowing that if she did this, she would soon find herself in that state of alertness and of a spacious calm. That is the experience of meditation and mindfulness is taking you to. It's freeing the mind. It's giving you a focus. It's being where you are. It's not letting your mind take you all over in scattered ways. Okay? And so these practices are really then about bringing the scattered mind back home to being centered. That's what you and I are about. That's one phase of spiritual growth and activity, and that takes a certain amount of discipline and giving oneself over to certain practices. Now, as you know, I've shared that I've been to India several times in the last few years and attended the University of Oneness, and they have teachings there that are very compatible with what we teach here. They're not another religion. They're actually simply bringing people of all faiths, all traditions, all world religions together in the same universal principles that everyone can embrace around love and forgiveness and oneness, okay? Not creating a new religion in any way. It's a beautiful thing. Unity is about oneness. That's what unity means, bringing all humanity together, embracing all people, embracing people of all paths, not saying we're the only way, any of that. It's like honoring each other. And so there's that goes on, and it feels like going home for me when I go there. But they also have lots of processes that have to do with clearing the mind, clearing the scattered mind, if you will, and being taken home into an experience of deeper oneness with God. Okay, and one of the times that I went there, it happened to be, they have group sessions scheduled. And people come from around the world, and hundreds of people are there for various sessions, and they're from Europe and China and Italy and Germany, and they're all speaking different languages, and they have interpreters, and it's quite something to experience as the dasas and the teachers are teaching and taking them through different dimensions of these sessions and these teachings. And so one of the times that I was back there, they invited me, and I told them my schedule didn't permit me to go except between this date and this date. And it just so happened they didn't have any session going on there at that time. So they said, come anyway. We will customize a session for you. So I was blessed and humbled by the fact that I went there and I had one-on-one with these teachers and dasas that normally, just have hundreds of people and you don't really get to connect with them. One-on-one in front of me in a small room mornings, afternoons, some evenings, and just that kind of focus and attention was amazing. But the reason that I mention that is they then took liberties with me in the sense that they could do processes with one that they could never do with the masses. And so one of the exercises that they had with me was they took me to a room, and it was a very dark room, no windows, and a small room. And I was there for 24 hours alone in this room. It had a small little mat, had a little altar that you could feel your way to, had a bathroom that you could feel your way to, everything dark, so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, okay? And it was, they would bring fresh water about 2 or 3 times during that 24-hour period, check, see you're okay. It was a unique experience, total darkness for 24 hours. I enjoyed it. It was very meaningful. I got to be fully with myself in that quietness. No distractions, nothing. Okay? And the intention was to experience this deepening connection with the divine. Not as something that is separate and outside of oneself, but a deepening connection and feeling and experience of the God within. The God within. And there was nowhere to look except inside, you see, in the dark. And there was nothing to see except more of my true self, if I was willing to be with it. And there's an African proverb that states, no matter how dark, the hand always knows the way to the mouth. Okay? So no matter how dark the room is, or how dark, the hand knows the way to the mouth. So it can feed itself, it can sustain itself, And it's saying no matter how dark things may be in a person's life, that there is a part of you that knows. There's a part of you that knows how to sustain yourself physically, at least, even in the dark times, even when you can't see how it is to feed yourself. But I want you to think about the heart. The heart. Even when our way is not clear, our heart is still there. Same way that our hand is still there. Even when the way is not clear, our heart is still there. It's beating. It just keeps going. And our hand, you see, can't eliminate the darkness. It can only find its way to the mouth. And likewise, our belief in life, our belief in God, our belief in good may not eliminate at times suffering and difficulties and challenges we may be facing. It may not take care of them right away, but our belief in them, our belief in these can find its way to our heart, to feed the heart. And so the path of the heart is what brings us back home. I want you to get that. The path of the heart is what brings us back home, or to the light, if you would. Remember, the heart knows the way. The heart knows the way. Your heart is always there. Your heart is always beating. Your heart is always pumping life into you. And your heart actually has a deep, deep spiritual knowing where your mind can be scattered and all over, and it's focusing even into the future and dreaming up outcomes that may never happen but you're frightened of. And your mind can take you in scattered places. But your heart, if you come back to the heart knows the way. Same way that the hand in the dark knows the way to the mouth. The heart, no matter what you're facing, no matter what the difficulty, if you quiet the mind enough to listen to the heart knows the way. It's something to always know. It knows the way home and the way forward. And we've all heard stories about the fish that become conditioned to the enclosure that they are in. They're in a fish bowl, and when it comes time to clean the fish bowl, you take them out and you put them in some other space, and you clean the bowl, and then you put them back in. Well, you've heard stories where people have maybe filled up a tub, a whole big tub, and then they've taken the fish out of the bowl and put them in the big tub and to clean it, and to clean their enclosure. And although now they're in this entire big tub to swim in, they find that these fish are all huddled together in this little small area, the size of the fishbowl that they had been in. And although there's nothing containing them from darting about and experiencing all of the space there, they're not able to experience this larger space of the tub. And so we have to ask, what had life in the small enclosure, what had life in the small enclosure done to their ability to swim into the greater expanse? And we have to ask ourselves, basically, in what ways do we tend to sort of go nowhere or shrink back from our world or pull back into our own self-imposed captivities? You know, what is the size of our tank? And how have we been conditioned to some kind of fear about life outside the tank or outside the box that we've created? You know, we all have a natural spiritual impulse to expand and grow. All right? If we listen to our heart will want to swim outside of that space. Our mind will want to restrict our going there in many ways. Spiritual growth, spiritual growth is the dynamic of freeing the mind to connect with the heart that is the intelligence of the divine that knows the way. And that's something to remember in that path. We all have a natural spiritual impulse to expand and grow. And sometimes we are conditioned to ignore that impulse that calls us to broaden and deepen and enlarge the sense of who we are held to be in the mind of God. We are an idea in the mind of God. We have to fill out, complete, and express that. It's like there's a blueprint of who you are, and this life is being given you the opportunity to go for it, you know, as a child of God. One's tendency to become conditioned to this small, contracted experience of life and of the world is sometimes referred to as blindness, and it's not referring to physical blindness. It's talking about a kind of spiritual, psychological blindness. And each of us are blind to a certain extent in our own way, in certain areas of our life, in certain aspects of our life. And each of us is blinded by certain degrees of fear. And whatever it is that we fear in life, we have to realize that there is some truth. At the same time there's a fear, there's at the same moment a truth, you know, that we are blind to, that we're not seeing and we're not allowing to be lived through us. Because, you know, the truth shall set you free. And so therefore, if you have a fear, you can go to a truth. It's hidden right now. Who's hiding it? My mind is hiding it. Well, how do I find my way? Well, I go to the heart. My heart will actually give me a level of clarity beyond my mind that wants to and tends to obstruct, because it's so conditioned to smallness and has, through the fears that we've been conditioned to for a lifetime. It can be like this. You know, your heart knows the way. Now Jesus, there's an instance where Jesus refers to the Pharisees as being blind, you know, blind in their teaching and understanding. And Jesus felt strongly that the Pharisees were lost and blinded by the letter of the law. He felt they were blinded by the letter of the law and they couldn't see their way to the spirit of the law, or the spirit of the divine. And in Matthew 15, he says to the disciples, he says, "Let them alone. They are blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind leads the blind, they will fall into a ditch," or whatever. And the Pharisees were always seemingly on Jesus' case, you know, giving him challenges about his disciples, things that they weren't doing. They weren't doing the letter of the law. And in this passage in Matthew 15, they have where they came and said the disciples were not washing their hands before eating bread. That's written in the law. And you know, it's okay to wash your hands, but Jesus emphasizes that it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, it's what comes out of the mouth that defiles a man. And he makes that distinction. And he there, in many places, refers to these Pharisees as blind guides. the foolishness of their emphasis and where they've placed their emphasis and where they put things as being important that are unimportant. And you have that humorous analogy that he makes where he says they're blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. You get that? It's like, oh man, some little unimportant gnat will strain out, but will go swallow a camel. They've got it all distorted in terms of what is most important. That's what Jesus is saying. It's not the letter, it's the Spirit. Where's the Spirit? The heart will show you the way. They were so full of their mind in terms of the letter of everything that they couldn't hear their heart. And that was the frustration of Jesus. Okay? The heart knows the way home. And one of the great challenges of the spiritual path is basically discovering who we are. Discovering who we are, who we really are, and not hiding who we are. There's a dimension of us that we're not in touch with, you see. Because we live in a house divided to a certain extent. And all of us do. And it's not to beat yourself up on it, but that's where spiritual growth is about, is to have less and less of the dividedness inside yourself and in the world. You see everything that goes on internally in people is reflected externally in the world around you. And so that dividedness, that polarity stuff, is really just a reflection of different internal becoming external, because the external is a reading on the whole collective consciousness of humanity, really. But who we are is very important. You may have noticed that life has a way of placing us in situations that require us to, really step up and be who we're meant to be. Right after Jesus talks about the gnat and the camel, he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup, but inside is full of extortion and in self-indulgence." And he says, first you must blind Pharisees, first you must cleanse the inside of the cup so that the outside may be clean also. And so, if we haven't figured it out, people, what he's talking about in the way that it's in the scriptures there, we are the cup and the dish. That's who we are. That needs to be cleansed, all right? That's where the focus needs to be. And so just like a piece of fine china, that you have, a dish, and if it's been used and it's covered and coated with whatever, it hasn't been washed, basically you can't see the purity of its design, that beautiful, rich china. And so you have to wash it off, you have to cleanse it, And so a dish may not have an inner and outer, but we do. And so there is a divine design on the inside that needs to be washed and cleansed, in a sense. There's that part. And again, the heart knows the way. The heart knows the way, and you have to listen to your heart. And so, from time to time, we are placed in situations where we basically have life appointments. Life appointments where whatever it is that has been covered over with the dish, whatever is the grime and the grease of our past and our history, we have to be given opportunities where we can make choices to show up in a new way, where we cleanse it off and bring forth who we really are. So if you're not being who you are fully in your life, part of spiritual growth is you're going to have life appointments to be able to show up and to make new choices, to be more of who you are, to stretch out of that contracted space that you maybe have been living from. And we may need to rinse off things like impatience and unforgiveness and jealousy and envy or anything that is covering up and hiding the all of who we are. All right? Spiritual evolution is about that, rinsing off, cleansing the true self so that it may fully emerge. Now, we've talked about the Pharisees, a bunch of Pharisees, but there was one famous Pharisee, most famous actually biblically, that we haven't mentioned, and that would be Nicodemus. And Nicodemus, he was a Pharisee who secretly believed in Jesus. At least he believed in his teachings. And it is said that, he came to Jesus and he said to him, I know that you are a teacher from God. And here's a Pharisee, all of them being opposed to Jesus, and he's coming in the night and secretly. and anonymously. And he would ask deep spiritual questions, and they would have deep spiritual conversations between each other, and about being born again and all of this, and you know the passage. But he would never acknowledge his association with Jesus in the light of day. You know, there was no indication of that. He would come to Jesus in the night, secretly, you know. And that had to be a conflict in him, because basically there is inner pain and conflict when one is not honoring what we know to be our truth in our heart. Our heart will take us home, but we have to honor the heart. And we have to bring what is in the heart to the light of day, not in the dark of night. And so there are elements of you and me that are lying there in our heart, if we will go to it and listen to it and allow it to lead the way. That maybe we know certain things, and we study certain principles, and we know spiritual things, and we know it in our head, but we really haven't made the journey to our heart where we're living them in the light of day. And so there's an element of void, there's a dissatisfaction, there's an inner discontent that people can have, and they don't know what it's about. It's basically not being loyal to the heart. It's only coming to your spirituality by night and not bringing it to the light of day. Not really being true to who you are in your heart on a regular basis, when you may be called to be. And so it's said that there's a Jesus and a Nicodemus inside of all of us. And we all have this inner voice of the divine that reveals the truth and the path of truth. And we have a voice that speaks in behalf of a separate self that you and I have created over time. And it's called the ego, edging God out. And some have also referred to these two, the Nicodemus and the Jesus, as being the true self and the false self. And basically the true self of you informs us what is real and authentic and true about you. And it also will reveal, because it's honest with you, it'll also reveal what is superficial, what is artificial, and what is not the truth. That which is not who you are. Have you ever, it's like a thief, okay, as an extreme example. A thief robs and does these things and may rationalize it in their mind that they have to do it. But in their heart, they know that's not who they are. You see? In their heart, they know that's not who they are. They really listen to their heart. But in their mind, they justify because they've got this going on and that going on and whatever. So mentally, one does things and is about things that in the heart we go against sometimes. And so the self informs us when we are being inappropriate or not who we are. And basically this separate self keeps us in fear, stuck. And so there's always a choice that we have every moment, really, as we encounter another difficult situation or any situation, and that is whether to hide what is really true about ourselves, to hide our real self and be guarded, if you will. And the other choice is allowing the true self to come out, to be you, and to be conscious about knowing who you are, and going to the heart and allowing it to lead the way. It will. It's there. So rather than being half in the game, we're whole in the whole game. And the real you wants to be who you are. It wants to be. And so ask what it is that you know are the true spiritual principles that you are aware of but aren't living. Much like Nicodemus, perhaps. It's time to live and honor what we know in our hearts. And Nicodemus was pretending by day to be a Pharisee and aligned with certain theologies and ideas and beliefs and lines of thought, and then would, in the evening, follow his heart. And eventually, his heart will win out, because at the end, there is one other mention of Nicodemus, and he's at the cross of Jesus. So it's like he followed his heart, and it took him to a new place. But, there will always be those who we, sooner or later, when we evolve spiritually, and when we're becoming something new, and when we're becoming something different, and when we're expanding and broadening ourselves, sooner or later who we are and who we're becoming will create resistance with those who would rather have us be something else, with those who would rather have us believe something else. And there were those who didn't want Jesus, to be what he was. They wanted him to be something else, of course. But he took a stand for who he was in the light of day and in the light of night. And at the end of the conversations that went on between Nicodemus and Jesus, it was really interesting where Jesus kind of put this point to him at the end of the conversation. Jesus says to him, "He who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen, that they have been done in God." Isn't that interesting? That was the parting message that Jesus left with this Pharisee who was coming to him secretly by the night, but couldn't bring himself at that time yet to be it by the light of day. And so Jesus is talking with the Pharisees, and he's telling them who he is, and this is in John 10, and they come out and they say, "Well, who really are you?" And he says, I and the Father are one," and they raise their stones to stone him. And he says, "Why are you wanting to stone me? For what good works?" And they said, "For blasphemy, because you, being a man, think that you are God." And then he gives them the letter of the law back and says, "But doesn't it say in your scriptures, ye are gods?" And they had to look at that, always planting the seeds that there's something more. Carl Jung once said,